Today we're talking equipment, specifically equipment you need to make your first brew. Now we're not going to delve too deep into specific types of brewing systems because everyone's setup, home, budget, whatever it may be, has their own limitations. So this is mostly the things you need to get your first brew done, kind of around the actual pots and heat and that sort of stuff. I will touch on it slightly, but we'll get there. So the other thing I highly recommend getting into this is, guys, don't be afraid to make your own equipment. This really isn't rocket science. And you know what? Who cares if it ends up a little redneck? Kind of like brewing with your cousin in a dairy barn. First things up is actually our scale. So I have two different scales, and the first one is like this. It needs to be fairly high capacity. I would do up to 30 kilograms. Reason being is that 1 liter of water is actually equal to 1 kilogram, which means that when you need to measure out your water volumes, say 20 liters for your batch size, you can do that with this scale. Second thing up is our gram scale. Okay, I prefer a very small scale like this to do things like our salts. So gypsum is particularly difficult to weigh out because you often have to feather it out, and a lot of scales won't read until you reach 1 gram. But you often are only putting in a few grams of each. So something like this that can see under a gram is important. You need a hydrometer, so you know how much alcohol, how strong your beer is going to be. Syringes, something like this is actually really helpful, especially if you're adding acids to help adjust your pH in your mash. Speaking of pH, pH meter, very important. If you're not adjusting for pH throughout the process, you will not have good beer. Somewhat of a convenience thing, these little cups, they're very nice for measuring out hops or other liquids. Although you should note, the volumetrics on these are never that accurate. They're often out by over 10%. So always make sure that you're weighing your volumes. A way to measure temperature. So this is our Temp Probe. There are other options available. It's important to still be able to have a secondary measurement of temperature. A lot of equipment comes with temperature measurement built in, but it's still worth having an auxiliary sort of way of doing that. Of course, a mash paddle. I actually brought in, just so you guys could see, we've got some pieces from the original homebrew equipment I have, which is our just propane cooker and 1 large pot. You need some way to cool your batches. This is a counterflow chiller. This is something I would recommend, where you put your wort in one side and cold water in the other. This works really great, and I would not recommend ever buying a plate chiller. Plate chillers can easily get clogged up. This can't. You're going to need a cleaning solution. Star San is the standard in home brewing, but also picking up some spray bottles like this make cleaning a lot easier. Brushes and that sort of thing are a good recommendation as well. You're going to need an auto siphon. This is basically a little pump. Pull it up. You let this check valve fill up with solution. Push it down and you can create flow. You're going to want to get some extra hose so that you can transfer from your different fermenters and vessels. Another add-on that you can get to this is a bottle wand that has a small check valve in the bottom that you depress, and it allows flow to fill a bottle. This is a lot easier than trying to kink hoses to stop flow when you're filling. Fermenter. You're going to need 2 of these at least. Chances are you're going to get more over time, but 2 is enough to start. You need an airlock with it. Make sure that you pick those up with the appropriate size cork for your fermenter. This keeps oxygen out, and you're going to need some dextrose. This is how you prime your bottles and get your carbonation in your final product. Lastly, you're going to need bottles. You'll have to figure out how much you need depending on your batch size. Usually it's around 19 liters. So if this is a 1 liter bottle, you'll need 19 of these. I prefer swing top bottles with a reusable top. This is much easier than buying a bunch of smaller bottles and then having to cap each one, and that's an extra piece of equipment. Also, honestly, bottling isn't that much fun. So the bigger the bottles, the less you have to clean and the less time to fill them. Another tip that I can give you about bottles is often swing top bottles are not recyclable in your area. So if you go to your local bottle depot and ask them to hold on to them, and you'll say pay them 50 cents a bottle, usually they're willing to hold those aside and sell them to you separately. Cheap way to get started. Okay guys, if you think I missed anything, please put in a comment below. I'll have links for all of this stuff in the description. If you like the merch, check out Hawktail Brewery, and well, you know the rest.